Yungeen has just released his new single, and I thought a long time about whether I should really make this video or not, but I decided to show you how simple it is to make beats in that style. In this video, I'm breaking down a beat in his typical R&B/paint style, and I'm going in depth behind the techniques used in those beats. And now let's break down the secrets behind Yungeen's amazing production. And the first thing that stands out in his typical beats are the beautiful chords, like for example on his new single, The Waltz, or Drunk in Chicago. And the main instruments used for those progressions are analog synths. And since I don't have any analog synths, and you probably don't have any too, I've opened up the best VST for analog synths, which is Analog Lab. The preset that I've used to start things off is the double softness preset. It works perfectly as the main sound or as a layer. And what I've laid down is a pretty simple 6-7-1-2 chord progression. And if you have watched one of my videos before, you already know a technique to make your chords sound more interesting. But in case you haven't watched one of my videos before, this is a good opportunity to subscribe to the channel real quick so you don't miss any of my future videos. So what I like to do to make these chords sound more interesting without overcomplicating the whole structure is to play around how I invert these chords. You can see that the progression stays the same, but in this case the third and the fourth chord in the second half are less stacked than in the first half. This just creates a different feeling because it makes it interesting for the listener without overcomplicating everything and switching up the progression too much. And for the effects on this one, I've only added a reverb. Before we show you some super crazy technique to make cool ear candy sounds for those type of melodies, let's hop into the bass real quick, because here you don't need to do crazy stuff. I opened up Omnisphere and used the Sine Move preset, which is a pretty dope preset, and the reason why I've said it's a more simple sound is because you can just follow the root notes like I did in this example. So you just copy and paste the root notes and put it into your bass. And the other simple sound before we hop into the ear candy section is the second piano that I've used. Because what you can hear in a bunch of these songs is that there are different layers to the chord progression. And in this case, I've opened up Keyscape and I've went with one of these hybrid presets, which is called Dual Calesta. And this preset combines two different pianos together and it sounds awesome. And the reason why it is an easy sound is because I've just copy and paste the first chord progression into this instance to layer those both sounds together. So let's hop into the ear candy section. The technique that I've used for this specific R type of sound is a technique that I saw a while ago in a Kavi Instagram reel, and I just thought it's so dope, I gotta use it in some of my melodies, and therefore I've opened up Analog Lab again and picked one of the lead presets, which is called Introspective. And now I will show you why this technique is so amazing. So we are not in D sharp minor with this melody, but the starting point of this technique is in D sharp minor. So the reason why D sharp minor is the starting point is because you can use all of those black keys. What you want to do is you press record in FL Studio and then you go up and down on the black keys on your MIDI keyboard. So once you did that, you can pitch it up or down in the key that you're actually in. So you will end up with something like this. And yeah, that sounds a little bit weird, but at this point you just gotta trust the process. All you need is some effects. The most important one is the delay. But in order to bring it into the right spot, the delay is not enough. You also need a reverb. So to put the finishing touches on it, I've also added an EQ and the Crystallizer default preset, which is pretty much another delay. And do you still remember what the arp sounded like? This is what it sounds like now. And before we go into the most important part when it comes to Yungeen's type of melodies, we've got another simple sound. To get one more ear candy, I've opened up Omnisphere again and I grabbed this bell sound. You can see it on your own. This is not some crazy word, but that's what you want for those type of melodies, because you don't want to take too much space with all kinds of melodies and counter melodies. And still keep in mind, the most important part is still missing. So besides the chords, you just want to have texture elements that add character without taking too much space. And to bring this bell into the right spot, I've also added a reverb. So let's get into the most important part when it comes to Yungeen's melodies. Because the most noticeable component in all those songs that I've just mentioned, like Drunk in Chicago, Honestly, many more on his projects are the vocals. And there are two things to keep in mind when it comes to vocals. First of all is the vocals have to go right with your chord progression. A lot of producers underestimate this factor. They just think they need a good vocal and a cool chord progression, but then you hear both together and it just doesn't sound right. So when I look up vocals, for example on Splice, or click my way through some vocal packs, just loop the chords over and over again while I'm hearing those vocals, so I can immediately hear if the flow and the rhythm of the vocals could potentially fit on the chord progression. And the second thing is of course to bring the vocals into the right spot by using the right effects. So let's go to point number one again. As I already told you, I like to use vocals from Splice. I think there's nothing wrong with it, but if you want me to show you how to make your own unique vocal samples in one of my next videos, just leave me a comment down below so I know that you want to see it. Besides Splice, you can also use Arcade. Arcade has very cool vocals, especially the hooked section works perfectly with those type of melodies. In this case, I've grabbed two vocals from Splice that complement each other perfectly. So let's hop into the effects, which is the second most important part. And it is super important that you work with what you already have, because some vocals you download might already have some effects on it. This is a dry vocal, so I first added a reverb. Then to give it more character, I've also added this crystallizer chorus, and I've also added an EQ to cut out the highs and the lows. In one of my next videos, I will break down more advanced techniques when I show you the secrets behind making amazing Hancho melodies. So if you don't want to miss that and you haven't already subscribed, you better subscribe now to don't miss out on that video. And to finish up this melody, I've only added two more sounds, which is a perk loop and one of those reverse guitar accents, which pretty much works as another ear candy sound. So before we break down the drums, here's what the final melody sounds like. So before we hop into the drums, I want to let you know that this loop is included in my new loop kit, which is out now. 20 placement ready loops in the style of artists like Lil Durk, Young Boy, Yungeen Ace, Quando Rondo, even some Rilo and Hancho stuff. If you want to check it out, check the first link in the description. Use code ACE to get 20% off on all kits in my store. For a limited time only, of course, so you better be quick. And now let's hop right into the drums. So except for the snare, all the drum components are from my kits as well. The most important part now is to keep the drums simple, that there's still enough space for an artist to rap on, but still give it the right groove. And that's why you don't need many drum components. But let's hop into a component that is super important in my opinion, and which you can hear in a lot of Yungeen Ace beats, which is this counter snare. And the reason why it is so important is because it adds this extremely cool bounce. And here I've also added my favorite technique, which is having a little switch up in both halves. So in the first half we still got this note in here, and the second half you can see it's not in there anymore. That might look like super silly and simple, but for people that don't have anything to do with music, when they listening to something in the club or in the car and they want to catch the rhythm, they kind of get surprised by things like that. The hi-hat bounce on the new song was going in, was so dope. So this section is pretty much exactly like on the song, which is a two-step with a couple of breaks right before the snare hits every time and right after the snare. And then for this second half I did my own thing with it a little bit, which is nothing crazy as well, because I've only added this roll to pick up some speed when no chords are playing. And alone the hi-hats and the snare goes so crazy with the chords that you don't need much on top. Of course we got some extra drum sounds, but at this point the bounce is already crazy. And for the 808, I've kept it pretty simple as well, because since it already has the bounce, all it needed was the smack, like just the 808 hitting, giving it the right low end. But all components together already had the groove, so I didn't need to go crazy with the 808, and you can barely hear that on those Yungeen Ace beats. And for the second part of the hook, I've also brought in a kick, just to give it even some more extra punch in the second part of the hook, and to let the second part of the hook stand out a little bit more. And the last component is the open head, which is another one of those components that just fine in those beats, because they work perfectly with everything you've got, but it's not necessary that you overdo it and let it play a crazy own rhythm. Works perfectly on the one and every time your 808 hits to underline the punch. So, and something that I want to talk about in those beats, which is super important, is that you take time for your intros, man. These intros in those beats are usually very long. With all the vocals going on, you want to build up the tension before the drums actually drop. Extending your intros is one of the key components if you want to make dope Yungeen Ace beats. for short. So, and this is everything you need to make amazing Yungeen Ace beats. I just want to quickly remind you about my new loop kit. First link in the description, 20 placement ready loops, and use code ACE for 20% off. Let's listen what the final beat sounds like. And if you now want to know how to make amazing street paint beats like for NBA Youngboy, Lil Durk, then you better check out this video.